ICQ Podcast, episode 261, Amateur Radio Book Review. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 261st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Bill November 3 Julia India X-Ray, and Chris Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is our popular book review feature, which we brought back for this episode. Well, as always, it's the subscription donors this episode that we're thanking, and they've helping to keep the podcast show advert free. We'd like you to consider us by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated, and more importantly, it keeps us advert free to keeps at your level of enjoyment on the show. Well, now we join Martin, Leslie, Edmund, Bill, and Chris to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including the homebrew kit and Maplin collapses. Hope you enjoy.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 261 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
What's this, Mr. Martin? Have I been promoted? Very good evening to you.
I'm promoting you, Leslie, and I'm showing you respect. Yeah, because you're behaving yourself, right?
No. I've still got my cup of tea and donkey biscuits.
That's all right then. I've also got Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Edmund. Good to have you with us. Bill Barnes is with us today. Bill, N3JIX, and everybody should know it's Bill's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Bill.
Thank you, everybody. This is Denial Day, where I deny that I'm getting older.
Actually, Bill, we're the same age. I noticed on Facebook earlier, so there you go. I'm in the same as you, really.
Yeah, we're 39 again.
That's the one, yeah.
Yep, that's in case anybody asks. I'm still 39. And instead of coffee, I actually have a soda here today.
Bill, we have a tradition at work. If it's your birthday, you're meant to bring donuts.
Well,
I knew I forgot something.
Hey, well, listen, Colin's brother, who actually is 39 this year, says he's not 39. He doesn't like 39. He keeps telling everybody he's 40 next year, not 39. So I don't understand that one. But I do. And last but least, we also have Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH, standing in for Matthew this week, aren't you, Chris?
I am. Hello again, everyone. How are you all doing?
Not so bad. Matthew, sir, is at the moment with his family out in Spain and can't make tonight. So, Chris is stepping into his shoes on this one. Right, our first news story. I kind of like this one. It said, Ada Lace book features ham radio. A nice little book for a youngster. Now, I'm not going to probably get to read this, but, putting amateur radio into children's books, to me, is exposure at a very early age. Great. What do you think, Leslie?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I had a look at the author, and I believe it's an author called Emily Caldery, and very, very clever lady indeed. But I think it's absolutely great. And if she can get stuff out like this, that, how can I put it? Just ignites the imagination of the kids, So this is something, and once you've got them, that's it. I think it's great.
Yeah, same here. Bill, I don't know this author. Is she an American author? And there's a whole series of books, isn't there?
There is a whole series of books. I am not sure exactly where she's at. I'm clicking on her. Yeah, I don't really see anything about telling us where she's at.
Yeah,
however, I do know this book's coming out May 1st, and I think I'm going to probably get a copy for the kids at some point.
Yeah, she I did check. She's from San Francisco, grew up in Morgantown, West Virginia, and she got a list of universities. MIT, I believe MIT. Truman. She's a Truman Scholar. Went to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and obtained an MS degree in aeronautics and Well, it's a whole list of stuff. Very, very clever lady indeed.
So what you're saying, Leslie, is she's far too clever for me.
Why am I, Lig?
Yeah. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
I confused myself initially by mixing up Ada Lace and Ada Fruit, because there is an Ada Fruit, isn't there?
There is.
Lady Ada from...
Lady Ada, yeah.
Yes. But then I realised that I was mixing up two completely different things. This looks good fun, doesn't it? I'm not entirely sure quite how true to life this is going to be. Apparently, she's 8 years old and she receives a message along the lines of "release the swarm," which then doesn't give a call sign. So I think there might be a bit of artistic license with amateur radio here, but if it gets people interested in radio, it doesn't matter. My first interest was broadcast radio before I graduated up to amateur radio. So if it piques anybody's interest, then that's a good thing, and it looks nicely illustrated as well.
Yeah,
it's a bit of fun as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the character name's a wordplay on Ada Lovelace.
Oh, it could be, couldn't it?
You know who Ada Lovelace is, right?
That rings a bell.
Google, quick Google.
English mathematician from the 30s, 40s. She passed away in the 1850-ish range. She did a whole bunch of mathematics that basically set up some of the stuff we use in computing even today.
Oh, yeah. No, I've got it up now. Somebody's got the brains of Inspector Morse to work this out. Well spotted.
and of course, wasn't the Ada programming language named after Ada, seem to recall?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris, you got left at the last. So,
well, my take on this one. So it's great that it's a kid's book, and it's also great that it's amateur radio in the mainstream media. So we've seen other examples recently. We've had Last Man Standing, the TV program, had an amateur radio or a ham radio part elements of that. It gets people. It's not like it makes people aware of what we're doing. It makes people aware of the hobby. I know there was Dilbert has got things on its cartoon about amateur radio. Sometimes I think the Simpsons had an amateur radio sketch once in one of their programs. I think even the Munsters, going back a long time, had an amateur radio item on it. So I think all these things where amateur radio, ham radio is in the mainstream media helps people to understand what it's about, and it's not like a foreign thing. People have heard of it. It just helps to plant that seed. An example for me, actually, I got my car insurance renewal through last week. I rang up yesterday to kind of have a chat with them about it, and I mentioned that I've got an amateur radio in the car, and she's like, I sounded a bit confused. Oh, ham radio, that's pretty cool, ham radio. So she kind of knew what it was, which is good. Even to so even people understand what it is. It's just useful to get that name out there, so people actually know what the heck we're talking about. So and obviously, as this is aimed at youngsters, all the better.
Yeah,
like I said earlier, if it sparks the imagination, it's great.
Exactly,
certainly is. Moving on, students' first entry into the school's roundup competition. They did phenomenally well. This group of students. I mean, looking here, they did 400 contacts. Over 40 states, 4 Canadian provinces, and 6 countries, including Germany, Finland, and Kosovo. Fantastic. What do you think, Bill?
This is fantastic. It's a high school in, I'm going to mess the name up, Berthoud, something like that, Colorado. They participated in the school club roundup on February 12th through the 16th. And exactly what you said, they did really, really good. Very, very impressive. Just very impressive that they did that well in this not really contest. Related, but not related to this, I also wanted to let people know that high school, middle school, not too terribly far away from here, contacted the International Space Station, Bellefonte Area Middle School, the Nittany Amateur Radio Club out of State College, the W3YA, set the whole thing up with them, and were able to get an ISS contact back on the 26th. That would have been Monday, 1759. That would have been about 3 hours ago from the time we're recording, a couple days ago. Either way, it's really neat. all this stuff is really neat. Getting kids interested in radio, I love it all the way around, whether it's a school club event like this or a contact with the International Space Station. Everybody's doing a great job. Keep it up, guys.
Yeah, keep it up. The one thing that did raise a chuckle with me was they were talking about the various bits and pieces, and they said about could take on a 32-minute shift. We're trying to change our shift system at work, and I thought, could I have a 32-minute shift, please? But no chance.
No, I think you got no chance, definitely, on that one.
No chance at all.
Well, I think there are certain jobs where I think people like air traffic controllers tend to work in, because it's very high concentration, and I'm sure operating in the contest is very similar, where you're having to have very high concentration, but you can't sustain that for too long.
You can't.
They tend to do it in short shifts, almost take a break and then go back and just to try to keep the brain active, I think, and not too.
I'm also willing to guess the 32 minutes squeezed into a school period of because usually school periods around here are like 40 minutes, so it gives them a few minutes to get in, a few minutes to get to the next class. I wonder if that's where it came from.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it does. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
They did very well, didn't they? Especially considering that there are some quite strict rules in place, and working into Europe and even Kosovo, which is somewhere I haven't managed to work yet. I know there were a number of operators there visiting up until recently, so maybe it was them that they caught, but even so, that's no mean feat, and we don't really have an equivalent to this in the UK, do we? So, no, very impressive.
No, it's a shame we don't have something like this go on in the UK. But there aren't that many schools that have ham radio in them. So.
We can, but it takes quite a bit of planning and somebody, a project champion to make it work. Yeah. And there's specific issues with schools. It can be done, but it requires a prime mover to get the thing going in the background. And without that person, it's very difficult.
Yeah,
agreed on that one, Leslie. I'm not an expert in education, but I believe in the UK we have this national curriculum, so they have to sort of fit things in around that. So whether whether or not our hobby fits into that particular one, I don't know. But if they had a bit more leeway, it might be a good way to teach science and electronics and lots of things that our hobby, I think, helps with in education.
You have a teacher at school that whatever subject sort of lights the room up and everyone's enthused and everything else, and it doesn't really matter whether it's science or whatever or radio. Once you get that person on that subject, and then the place it just runs. But it requires that special type of person, I believe.
Yeah.
Could be fertile ground though, because in the 1980s, when I was at junior school, some of the people I was there with were incredibly competitive, so something like that might get them going in a way that, I don't know, a special event station or a jamboree on the air station might not. I'm not competitive at all, not even a little bit, which is why I'm not a contester, you see. That's my cop-out excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. But everybody always mentions science, maths, and that sort of thing. But there's two other areas amateur radio can help very much with schooling, and that is languages and geography.
That's very true, actually. Yeah.
But we often don't think about those.
I only know geography because I was chasing DX countries.
Yeah, that's a good way of learning it, Bill. It's a good way of learning it. I mean, my grandson's at the moment drawing flags and doing all sorts of bits and pieces. He can draw umpteen flags from different nations. And we were sitting down the other week, and he's only 6, and we were sitting down the other week, and I was showing him where they were on the atlas, and we were talking about it. So, it does help with education of a lot of things. So, yeah, good on them. And that's a really good one for the students there, and let's hope they've got the knack, as they say, and going to keep it up. Moving on, this one's kind of strange because both in the States and both in the UK, we don't have this problem. It says here, experimenters experimental homebrew equipment does not require type approval. But we're talking about South Africa here, and type approval is something that us as a group of amateurs in the US and the UK are very lucky not to have to go through. What do you think, Edmund?
Absolutely, because I think even foundation license holders in the UK can use kits that have been built to a published circuit, can't they, rather than things they've just designed themselves from scratch. So, yes, is that right? It's been a long time since I was an M6. But we are very lucky in the UK. It's quite liberalised, isn't it?
Yeah. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, I think the rules on that are you can, as an intermediate or above, I think you can build your own equipment to transmit on. So I think you can build receivers and you can build aerials and everything else. But I think in the UK, as a foundation license holder, you have to build either use type-approved equipment or a type-approved kit. But no, I mean, I was surprised when I saw this on the list there. I was surprised that I didn't realise that in certain parts of the world, amateurs had to use type-approved equipment. So it's good that they're relaxing that rule, because obviously it's a big part of the hobby. So, for some people, building their own equipment is a huge interest to them. So that this will hopefully help that in that part of the world.
Yeah, I think so. Bill, what's your thoughts on this one?
Being someone who built transmitters when he was a technician class license, I never even gave it a thought until I read this. But it makes perfect sense. Not some areas of the world, just they wanted you to, if you built something, you had to get type approved. It kind of makes sense, but at the same time, I think it hurt a lot of homebrewers and experimental folks, and there's some pretty creative people in South Africa. I know that for sure, and I'm sure that they're going to really enjoy being able to just build stuff and try it out and test it out on their own before, without having to go through any kind of lab testing or, paperwork filing.
Yeah. To me, my thoughts on it sort of goes against the grain of what we do. We're sort of experimentation. Does it work? Now, sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes it works quite. Yeah, there's all sorts of results, but we learn by experimentation. I mean, if you look at some of the European countries and their requirements on, let's say you have to do a planning, similar to a planning application for your station setup itself. I think we're very, very lucky here, and our regs, they are numerous. I've seen that the Ofcom documents are quite thick, but they are quite liberal as well. You can do quite a lot. And yes, I do agree on your point on the intermediate. Things like Pixies and that can be built by I believe they can be built by the intermediate, but not by foundation. That there is something along those lines. There we go. That's my thoughts on the subject.
Yeah.
So what if an intermediate license holder builds one and gives it to a foundation license holder?
It's not a type-approved radio.
Okay. Now, you see, this is why, for a little bit of work, it's really worth going for the highest level of license that's available in your country, because once you've done that and been successful, you don't need to worry about restrictions on lower license classes.
It goes.
There you are. Elitism has its advantages.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest advantage for me for having the full license was to be able to operate abroad when I go off on holiday. But it's quite interesting. The UK, you've got to go through the through license system. And I have had people on foundation courses that are designing military radios for a living. They work for a local electronics company not that far from us as a club. And their technicians turn up because they want to get an amateur radio license, and they're bored rigid on the foundation license. But the problem is, I have to cover the syllabus, and there are, and let's be honest about it, some things they don't know.
Yeah. Let's rewind the clock back.
Yeah.
Where it was a city in guilds. We're probably getting into a bit of an area here. Well, let's rewind the clock back to sitting guilds, and people could take I think it was an hour and a half exam, and to be blunt, couldn't wire a 3-pin plug.
That's the exam I took, mate.
And I'm taking the extreme. an extreme view.
Yeah.
But you had people that, I mean, the new exam, yeah, it's got its, I say new, it's been around quite some time now, but people can put together a station, they can wire solder coax connectors, they can put bits and pieces together. To my mind, yeah, it's got its faults, but it's a darn sight better than what was around before.
Agree with you 100%, Leslie. Agree with you 100% on that. So,
hey, one last comment since we're talking about foundation licenses briefly.
Yeah.
I did want to put the bug in your ear, Martin.
Go on.
There is an M6 that's a friend of mine that lives temporarily in Ireland who really should be getting his intermediate, and he may know somebody in the family that could help him get that done.
Is he a bit of a boy?
He is a boy, but he needs to be a two-man.
His call sign wouldn't be M6BOY by any chance, would it?
Yes, it would be, actually.
But even if he got his intermediate, he still wouldn't be allowed to operate in Ireland. He'd have to get his full license.
Yeah,
correct. But we got to get him the intermediate.
Well, it's the next step. Absolutely, yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely. If he's listening, we'll find out later.
Yeah, he does listen.
I do want to work him on from Ireland at some point.
Yeah,
give him some friendly digging. So you know.
yeah, we will. Okay, he's over in a couple of weeks, so I'll tell you that at the end of the news stories. Anyway, moving on. Radio hams help out the GirlGuides to make some international contacts, and this was Thinking Day on the Air that happened a few weeks ago. Thinking Day on the Air is not as publicised as Jota, which the Scouts do, but there are GirlGuides that get very excited about making contacts and talking to other people the other side of the world. And it was quite nice that a group actually got round to doing this. Do you want to go first, Chris?
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. The Thinking Day on the Air is a great thing. I know, Martin, you've done it before. You've helped out. I know you did a feature on it many years ago, which was interesting. What's also good actually about this story is it's got into the mainstream media. It's got out into the, it's promoting the hobby. So the Norfolk News had an article about this in their website, and I don't know if it's also a printed publication, but certainly it was on the website talking about amateur radio, and there's a big picture of them all there with the team, and it's great. And also, this article talks about the club, so the Butterfield DX club, with the team that helped out, on this occasion to get them on the air. And again, it talks, they've spent a lot of time and effort in sort of reaching out. They've got I think it's called the Community Outreach Team, I think, part of their group that was helping out. And they've actually managed to get some funding for some of this. So they managed to get some money from the RSGB, from the Legacy Fund, to buy a trailer and generator. And they've also got some money out of the National Lottery as well. So they're obviously quite well organised and I think done a good job. So, not only are they helping these youngsters to get on the air and have a great time and get them involved in the hobby, they're also good at promoting it as well and getting them, and getting them themselves in the press as well, which is all good for us as a hobby.
Certainly is. Leslie, your part.
Well, I've just been looking at their website and the Butterfield DX Club website, and they're all standing there. Some are standing and sitting down, and they've got this splendid tent. I wish our club had one like that. It really is a splendid tent with their setup on display. Have a look at the website. I must say, the money from the lottery, money from the RSGB, great stuff. It's supporting the hobby, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, agree with you on that one. Edmund, any thoughts on this one?
In my experience, which may or may not match anybody else's experience, Thinking Day on the Air, the young ladies who come along to that and take part normally are more enthusiastic at having a go than their male counterparts in Jamboree on the Air. I haven't been involved with the Thinking Day station for a few years now. There was a rather unfortunate clash of dates a few years back where Thinking Day clashed with the Coupe du Ref, the French national contest, And I remember being very frustrated trying to find anywhere on 40 metres where I could call CQ. And it was just wall-to-wall French contest stations. I'm trying to be as impartial here as possible, having mentioned I'm not a contester. But happily, for the last couple of years and this year definitely, the two events were 7 days apart. So special event stations for Thinking Day on the Air did actually stand an earthlies of finding a spot on an HF band to use. So assuming that clash doesn't now happen anymore, anybody out there who's listening to this is thinking about it, thinking, well, should I get involved with Thinking Day, or would I do better to do Jamboree on the Air instead? Ideally do both, obviously, but if you get the opportunity to involve yourself with Thinking Day on the Air, it's a really nice event, and as I say, enthusiasm levels do seem to be higher, and maybe there's a little bit less shyness as well around the microphone with girls rather than boys. But it's a great story, and I'm very pleased to see that this group in particular are doing the business.
Yeah. Bill, you've got a couple of youngsters, and they can't be far off a girl guide. Or I think the one's a girl, isn't it?
Yeah, I have 2 boys and 2 girls, but none of them are involved in the Scouts or the girl. Well, over here we call them Girl Scouts, but they're the Girl Guides group.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole thing was interesting, and I think it's really nice when a club goes out and helps with an event like this. I mean, they did some really neat stuff. The Girl Guides did a transmitter hunt at 50 yards away. They were shown how the Morse code works, and they all keyed their name in, which means they got a Morse certificate. And don't we know someone else that does Morse certificate with the kids on the Belfast?
I think Chris does.
I do, and Martin, you help as well.
Yeah.
I think the Loughton Club does that as well when they do their field day on the local field days.
Yeah. I think involvement with people and children. And the thing is, Chris and I, we do more certificates on the Belfast for the children. But that doesn't stop us, because if the mum or the dad or the whole family look really interested, we do the whole family. And we'll give the parents a certificate as well, because it's just as important to give everybody interest. But yeah, Thinking Day on the Air, Bill, a good one if you ever get a chance to get involved with it. But as I say, it's interesting. Moving on, Chris, you added the next news story. Maplin's collapses after rescue talk fails. So probably
Oh boy.
Yeah. So probably outside of the UK, most people won't have a clue who Maplins are. Think of Maplins like Radio Shack was in the States. Basically, they were a component company that sold components and interesting electronic equipment at their conception. They kind of went just down the same route as Radio Shack and Tandy, in my opinion. Ended up selling all sorts of oddities at exorbitant prices and got lost direction, I would suggest. But Desi, you're biting at the bit, I can tell. Go for it.
Me? Do I ever bite at the bit? Look, okay. Recently on the high street, we've had situations where about 1 in 3 shops have folded. Yeah, the competition's been fierce. High rent and rates have been exorbitant. Just to put the key in the door, and before you do it, you've got to find so much money. And yeah, Martin, you're right. So I personally found some of their stuff quite expensive. So, given all these factors, some companies' shops are going to close, and it's just one of those things. If you're not on the ball and you're not, like we were talking with the previous club, you've got to go out there and you've got to keep bashing away and you've got to keep winning. If you sit back on your laurels and stay where you are, you're gone. And that's exactly what's happened with these people, unfortunately, because I like the shop. I like pottering about and looking at the bits and pieces, but they did get too expensive.
Yeah, agree with you. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
This is a very sad day. Back in the mists of time, even before I became interested in broadcast radio in the early 90s, back even further than that, when I was at junior school in the 80s, one of my dad's friends who was interested in electronics would send me the Maplin catalogue as a Christmas present every year, and I would always look forward to receiving it, partly because of the wonderful graphics and drawings and designs on the front cover. They were of things like spaceships and seemed very futuristic and high-tech and appealing. I'm sure all of you out there who were around then can visualise what I mean, can't you, Martin?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, yeah.
And sometimes I would choose a few things that I wanted, and my dad would fill in the form in the middle of the catalogue and write a cheque and stick it in an envelope and send it off. And it was a different world, wasn't it, before the internet? But that was then. And more recently, as you probably gather, I'm more from the operating side of amateur radio rather than the constructing and kit building side. More recently, I've visited Maplin rarely. I couldn't actually tell you offhand exactly what the last thing was that I bought. And I agree with what Leslie said. In recent years, it does seem to have become more a sort of gadget, high-tech, boys' toys, gimmicky type retailer. With, broadly speaking, quite high prices. If you went in and you weren't looking for anything in particular, you might see something that caught your eye, and you might get an absolute bargain, and sometimes you would get an absolute bargain. But generally speaking, if I needed to buy an item, then Maplin wouldn't be my first place where I would look for it. And if I decided that I needed it right now and couldn't wait for it to be delivered from an internet site that I bought it off, if I walked into Maplin knowing that they had it in stock, I would go in with the expectation of paying, shall we say, a higher price for it rather than a lower price for it. Maybe that's part of the convenience of having them there on the high street, but oh dear, it's mixed emotions here. Sadness for what has been, and of course electronics, the Maplin magazine. I've got a few copies of that lying around. That was a great magazine. Don't understand most of it, but it's still a great magazine. And that tinged with what I've just said, the way the company has gone in recent times. So I'd be very sad to see them disappear completely. If they do disappear completely, and I've got a nasty feeling they might, but when did I last buy with them? So maybe it's partly my fault. Don't know.
The high street is very, very, very competitive, and you've got to be on. I mean, electronic products have got a life, let's say, 2 years. So you really got to be on the ball with the latest all the time, and if you're not,
Yeah, it's gadgets. Chris, what's your thought?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. So I think it'd be a real shame. I was actually there on Saturday and bought some batteries. So I have been very recently, and kind of echoing what the other guys have said, really. I think it kind of lost their way a little bit. They started off as a kind of specialised kind of place that sold components and kits, and kind of similar, I suppose, to what Radio Shack perhaps started out doing. And that was all mail order. Then they started to have shops, and they started to really expand quite a lot. I know that there's now Maplin in most high streets. I think they said that looking online, there's something like 200 outlets now around the country. So there's a huge expansion over the last few years, and the product range seems to, like you say, have broadened a little bit. So now they tend to sell disco equipment and security alarms and computer components. I didn't actually notice they were selling drones in there as well. You know, those kind of
that's true.
Things. So maybe try and keep up with technology. But I think you're right. I think the prices, it's very, very difficult for a high street bricks and mortar shop to compete with the likes of Amazon, because the overheads it's a completely different model, and a lot of the shops in the high street now are really struggling to compete with the with the internet, because obviously it's different. It's a different, the overheads are completely different. So where you might go into, I think what like Evan was saying, if you want that component today, if if you're building a circuit and you need that one transistor or that one component you haven't got, you don't necessarily mind paying an extra couple of pounds just to get it, because you can get it today rather than waiting for it to arrive from all the online electronic component suppliers that might be much, much cheaper. I remember years ago buying 100 resistors for like £2, whereas Amazon, from an online retailer, not Amazon actually, one of the kind of specialist ones, and yet Maplins are charging like £2 for like one or two. So there was a huge difference in price, but you can kind of see why. A lot more staff. There's a lot of shops on the high street, huge rents to pay. So very difficult for for them to compete, unfortunately. But I guess that's just the way. It might just be that the high street trouble's going to be, of course, once all the high street shops have gone. I mean, I think there's always going to be a high street shop requirement, things like food and clothes. Because food goes off. Although on Amazon are getting into that market as well. And clothes, you can go and try things on, make sure they fit, and is it actually good quality, etc. I think there's always going to be a market for those sort of shops. But I think for some of the more specialist types of things where it's just based on price, I think shops like Maplin are going to lose out, unfortunately. So, I guess the high street's going to change. The problem's going to be, of course, once all those shops have closed, is that then going to affect the market? Are we then going to find prices going up again because actually there's less competition? So, be interesting to see what happens over the next few years there. But a real shame for especially for people that work there as well.
Yeah.
Oh yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, before I pass it over to Bill, because Bill did mention this is very similar to Radio Shack in the States, the demise. Just one item I remember about 18 months ago. I was in Maplin's and looking at the tool section, and they had a kind of I'll describe it as a watchmaker's screwdriver set. It was a very small screwdriver set with fine blades and one thing and another. They wanted £6.99 for it. 50 yards or 50 metres for those who've gone metric across the road was a pound shop. And they had the same item in there. All right, a different blister pack, but it was exactly the same item for £1. So, that's the difference that they were up against in some ways. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Well, just echoing what everyone said, it's sad to see a store go out, especially ones that had, they had 2,300 staff working for them. Man, that sucks. But the overhead just to run a store, I mean, I completely understand it. Likewise, I mean, when Radio Shack was going out and Maplin's now going out, all these stores that followed this very parallel kind of evolution. They started out as a hobbyist specialist store. They went into computers a little bit. They went into some other, consumer electronics. Radio Shack then bet the farm on selling cell phones when that was picking up. It's just a tough market. It's a tough market especially the way that the shipping logistics work now, as Martin painfully remembers about loading trucks and getting stuff from warehouse A to house B. Now that we can move stuff around like this, as long as the whole universe doesn't fall apart with like a massive power outage, for example, or a fuel shortage, small shops, they weren't a small shop, they were the biggest in the UK, it sounds like. They're just not going to be able to compete with the big internationals.
Can I put this into context? One of the I live in Chingford, and a small shop at the local high street is the rent and rates is £26,000. So that's rough rule of thumb. That's £500 a week the shopkeeper has to find before they do anything.
Yeah, and that's not covering electricity and all those things.
That's a small shop.
Yeah,
and most Maplins normally are a lot larger than the average shop.
Yeah, big overheads, which unfortunately is the way of the world. All right, well, that's depressed us all. But as we come to our last news story, that Chris put in. I'm blaming Chris for this one because
yeah, this is a fun one. Go on.
Yeah, it's a fun one. Chris found a news story that said Morse code shoes send toe tapping text.
Yeah, someone's having a laugh.
Go on, Chris, it's yours. You go first.
This one is completely bonkers. So, in fact, it's a bit like the previous one, where the other episode where they were trying to transmit electricity over RF. But anyway, this one is equally as bonkers. So I saw this on the BBC today, which is Wednesday, before this gets published. So Rory Catherine-Jones, who's the BBC correspondent for technology, is over at Mobile World Congress, which I think is a very large annual exhibition where the various mobile phone manufacturers announce their latest and greatest technology. And he spotted a company selling, and you need to watch the video really because it's quite interesting to watch. But companies selling essentially industrial type shoes or boots that send messages to, I don't know if they send or receive, but they send things. They kind of vibrate Morse code messages to each other. It's just apparently it's a safety thing, so they can communicate information between workers. I'm guessing maybe, thinking about it, if you're in a very noisy environment, maybe it's a way of sending a message so everyone can feel it rather than hear it. I don't know. Maybe it has got a serious use. But I did have to go and check the date. It wasn't April the 1st when I saw this come out today. But watch the video. It's quite fun. And in fact, it starts off by playing a little bit of Morse. And I had to play it a few times, but I did actually decode it as BBC Tech Barcelona, because Barcelona is where they hold this event every year. But it made me laugh. And of course, it is kind of highlighting Morse code still out there in the world. So yeah, it looks interesting. But what do you guys think?
Yeah. It's a giggle of the day.
Yeah. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I watched a video earlier, and I actually thought it was a prank.
Yeah, probably is, Bill. But
hey, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Edmund, your thoughts?
That was my reaction as well, and even Rory Catherine-Jones asks the question towards the end of the video, is this serious? Or words to that effect. And all I can say is watch the video.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, it seems like this year, every day is April the 1st. So far with some of these news stories, but hey hum, if it brings a smile to people's faces.
I just had a thought. Does our English phrase bonkers have the same meaning in the States?
Well, you have to ask Bill.
Okay.
I don't want to get political, but it seems like we're being run by people who are bonkers.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
Right. Well, I'm going to dig you out this hole, Bill, because I know you got a hard stop coming up shortly. So that's the end of all our news stories. I'm going to run around the table quick and find out what everybody's been up to. Bill, I'll let you go first because you may have to duck out if your hard stop hits us. So what have you been up to, Bill?
A little bit. It's been about a month. And I go back through my logs and say, okay, is there anything worth talking about? Z60 Alpha, tagged and bagged on 20-meter RIDI.
Yeah.
Yay me. For those that aren't aware, Kosovo is now valid for DXCC after, what was that, January 26th, 2018. You work them after that, council. A whole bunch of different groups, basically invaded Kosovo to do the expeditions, and I got the Z60 one, which was really cool. The other part that was really cool is I got it during the CQ Worldwide WPX RIDI contest.
Right.
And I ended up working 150 QSOs with 129 prefixes for a score of 53,000 some odd points. That's probably the most I've contested in years. But to give you guys a kind of like a flip-flop story here, the reason why is my friend Dave, KY3W, was emailing me, texting me, pestering me, because he ended up doing 683 QSOs, 386 prefixes for a score of 642,000 points, and he just could not believe that I wasn't keeping up.
Pretty impressive.
It is impressive.
And then he turned around and the next weekend did a DX contest. It was a ARRL CW DX contest. He did 391 CW QSOs for 208,000 points. And then he did the CQ 160 meter SSB contest the weekend after that and sent me a note saying, why weren't you on 160? I got 366 QSOs, 50,000 points. I only missed 2 states for, worked all states on 160. And I'm like, dude, I have other things to do.
Is your friend very competitive by any chance, Bill?
Yeah. He's a riot. And he was really giving me a hard time because I worked him on 75 RIDI. And then he's like, oh, good, you're in the contest. I'm also on 40. It's like, I'm going to be on 40 in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up was after the CQ Worldwide RIDI contest, I rejiggered my RIDI setup a little bit. Mm-hmm. The two-tone decoder, which was written by Dave, oh my gosh, what's G3YYD? That by far worked the best for me, and so I rejiggered my RIDI station to use more copies of two-tone in the various modes, and I actually have two-tone set up to use my tiny FSK Arduino set up to actually key the 706 and send the RIDI out that way. Something new, trying it. I'll see how things go on the next contest, which is, by the way, the Bark HF RIDI contest, which happens on the 17th through the very early part of the 19th of March. And that's one that's you send an RST, you send a serial number, message number, and the 4-digit time of the QSO in UTC. So that's kind of neat because it has a slightly different exchange, so it's a different kind of contest. Slows it down a little bit.
Right.
What was that contest called again? Sorry.
The British Amateur Radio Tele Group, BARC, HF Radio Contest. It's one of yours, guys. They do like 4 contests a year. One was in January, one's in March, and then the other 2 are later in the year.
Yeah, March is a little bit busy for me, but Leslie, what are you?
No, I've made a note because what I do have, and you guys are George's going to drop on this. I do have underneath my bed in one of the drawers is a Tono 9000E, or is it a 7000E? One of those 2. And it's been sitting in there, and you've just given me the right excuse to get it out and knock the dust off it. So
you have to. That's all I'm saying, guys. Is if Leslie hooks that up, I want to see pictures.
Yes.
Yeah. You
I
got to
think
go
it's
for
the 7000E off the top of my head. I mean, it's a really old-fashioned piece of kit, but it works really, really well. The last time I got it out. But anyway, sorry. Back to you.
That was it. I already muted.
All right. Okay. So what else are you going to get up to, Leslie?
Nothing at the moment because we've been chock-a-block with work. So amateur radio's had to take a back seat for a while, but we'll get back into it again. No worries.
You will. Well, Edmund, you been busy?
I don't think I've done anything at all.
Come on, you must have done. Even I've done something this time.
Well, apart from a couple of rag chews with club members on 77s, no, I don't think I've done anything. I was going to say anything noteworthy, not even anything unnoteworthy. It's life, isn't it? It sort of gets in the way.
It certainly does, and weather at the moment with the snow.
Yeah, well, I've given up what's going to happen, trying to work out what's going to happen with the weather. The last 2 days I predicted there would be nothing, and each time I've drawn back my curtains and there's been a bit of snow on the ground, nothing too bad. But the day after we're recording this, that will be Thursday the 1st of March, there is quite a lot of snow and strong winds predicted down here. So tomorrow I will probably be listening to 2 meters quite closely to see if there's any rainet activity, and also the local 4x4 recovery guys, if they're out and about rescuing people, they stay in touch using a simplex frequency on 2 meters. They all hold mostly foundation licenses, but they've got a couple of intermediates and a full license there as well. And coming up Wednesday, the 7th of March, Amberley Museum, where I'm now an official volunteer, that reopens to members of the public all the way through until October. So it's open Wednesdays to Sundays inclusive. So if you like special event stations, the permanent special event call sign Golf Bravo 2 Charlie Papa Mike could be on the air all and any of those days, all the way through from the 7th of March till the end of October. And I will be there on that Wednesday for the inaugural opening day of the new season. And hopefully we will get on the air and find that all the equipment still works when we go in and switch it on for the first time. Hopefully we won't spend the day trying to repair loads of stuff, and hopefully we will have an on-air presence, probably on 40 metres.
Sounds good to me. So you have had some interesting things you've been up to. Chris, what have you been up to?
So, I've been off work for the last week, which has been good. Unfortunately, Morse, I know you've been off as well. I know the bad weather, we were talking about perhaps doing some radio, and the bad weather seems to have beaten us. It's been, I don't know if those outside of the UK maybe not aware, but it's been, below zero for the last few days. And we've had a bit of snow, and as Evan was just saying there, it's going to get worse, I think, for the next couple of days. So, unfortunately, it's not field operation right now. It's probably not a good idea, unless you want frostbite.
Yeah, true.
But I've been doing a little bit of operating from home. A few contacts on HF, not a massive amount. One little thing where radio came in handy. Having a problem with my car key fob. I've got two key fobs, and one of them stopped working. I thought, I'll just change the battery. So I did that, and it still didn't work. So I actually did a little test. I got my working one, and I got what the frequency was off the internet, and I could hear when I tuned it into my Yaesu FT857, and pressed the button, and it made a little noise on the radio, so I knew that it was transmitting, and did the same thing on the other one, and it was dead. So I knew it wasn't the battery. I knew it was something. I knew the actual device itself was faulty. It wasn't the car. It wasn't the coding. It was definitely an issue with the key fob. So that kind of helped me to diagnose the problem. So that was useful. Coming up, Martin, we haven't been, have we, for a little while now, to HMS Belfast. Our last trip we had to cancel, unfortunately. I had to go to work. But I'm aware, as of the 1st of March, there is a new call sign, a special event call sign that's going to be used for 3 months. So listen out for GB80GGCN. So it's 80 years in March since HMS Belfast was launched. So they have a special call sign, GB80 for 80 years. And then Belfast's original call sign, when it was a ship, in operation, in service, was GGCN. So GB80GGCN is that call sign. Listen out for it. Get it in your logbook. And we're expecting, I guess, on our next visit, Martin, so perhaps work a few pile-ups, because I think that's going to be a popular one to get in people's logs.
I'm pretty sure it will be, Chris. Pretty sure it will be.
That's going to be a lovely call sign to send in CW, isn't it?
It's a bit long. And then I think, as you say, Edmund, today I've been at home and it's been quite snowy and horrible outside. So I did actually have the radio on in the background, just on scan around the local repeaters, just in case somebody out there needed a bit of help. So it's worthwhile doing that when it's bad weather. Just if you're at home or you've got a radio in the background, just have your radio on, just listening out for anybody that might need your help, because you never know.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll give you my rundown. For a change, I've done quite a bit, so I'll do it as quick as possible. Chris and I were out last Saturday evening. We went to Martin Rothwell's stag do, where we promised to behave ourselves and not chain him to lampposts or anything like that. But now Martin decided he wanted a very quiet stag do and just go out and have an evening meal with friends. And so Chris and I were there. Colin turned up from Ireland, and a couple of other people. So it was good fun. Martin gets married on the 10th of March, so getting much done before now on the 10th of March is going to be a bit tight, because I'm supposed to be writing my speech, best man's speech, and like always, it'll be a last minute wing it on the day probably, although Emma's panicking that I'm going to do something like that. But hey hum, that's life. What are we doing up to radio-wise? Well, the other Saturday I was on 40 metres and the band seemed quite dead. Apart from 80 metres, and the antenna I had up wouldn't tune on 80 metres, which was a bit of a shame. But I did work at a station in Germany, and I did work a station up in the Auckland Islands, so at least the transmitter and the aerial were working, although everybody seemed to be on 80 metres that day, which is a bit of a shame. The other thing is satellite contacts. No, I haven't done them yet, but I've been busy. I joined AMSAT UK last week. Yeah. Joined AMSAT UK last week, so I thought I'll bite the bullet. I wrote a programming file for my FT817, put as many satellites, FM satellites as I could into the memories, and that's been programmed in, ready to go. So that sounded good. I also resurrected an old realistic scanner which I got from Tandy's, which is the equivalent of the old Radio Shack. It's a realistic Pro 2035, and I've had that connected to a collinear on the house, scanning to see what satellite traffic goes over. And I've been very disappointed because there wasn't very much, but occasionally it stops on something and I've heard some voices. So I'm semi-listening to see what's happening as well on that. And I also put up an outside active antenna for HF, so that I've got this little active antenna up on the gutter of the house, so I can use it with my software-defined radio, so I can do HF as well as switching to the collinear for VHF, UHF. So kind of been quite busy in a roundabout sort of way. Looking forward to making that satellite contact with Chris. So after Martin's wedding, Chris and I will probably be getting ready to do our contact, satellite contact. And equally, the weather should be a bit warmer getting in towards April time, I reckon, Chris.
Yes, I think at this time of year, satellites operating outside is probably not a bit of a no-no without wearing the Arctic gear. So I'd suggest yes. Hopefully by springtime things should be a bit warmer and yes, be much better. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So all in all, I think we've all been pretty damn busy, guys, and lot on the cards. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX.
You're welcome, and thank you very much. Good chat, everybody.
Yeah, it's a good one, Bill, and I say good to have you with us. Mr. Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
It's been a blast, Martin. Enjoyable as always.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin.
No problems. And as I say, we'll catch up with you again shortly. And Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Fun as usual.
Yeah, no problems. Okay, guys, I'll say 73s and we'll catch you all again soon. 73.
Cheerio.
73. Cheers.
73.
Yeah.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief for me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with news from Sweden, where a new driving law, which is coming into effect at the moment, could have adverse effect not only on amateur radio, but on other industries as well. The SSA, the Swedish National Amateur Radio Society, has identified that the text used in the legislation could not only stop amateur radio use while driving, but also could affect other industries as well, and emergency services, etc. And they're calling on the Ministry of Food and Transport to clear up the text of the law to obviously make it clear on what's allowed and what's not allowed. The SSA believes that the law should be formulated so that there's a clear that the prohibition does not apply to handheld microphones on a vehicle-mounted communication radio. So the SSA sent a letter into their local ministry, and I'm obviously hoping for feedback and to clear up the matter for their members. Argentina has a balloon that's done 2 trips now around the world. The El Pico Globio is a whisper beacon balloon which completed its second orbit of the Earth in middle of February. It flew over Patagonia and then headed north at an altitude of 12,000 meters towards Buenos Aires. And as I say, then following day flew over Uruguay and it turned east out to the Atlantic Ocean to head off on its third circle of the Earth. Pico Globo transmits a whisper beacon at a frequency of 14.0956 megahertz. We've got a link on the ICQ podcast website if you'd like to check the progress of the flight of the balloon. And we now finish off the news in brief with news that popular Apple Mac login software MacLoggerDX has been updated now to version 6.17. It includes some support for icon rigs, the IC7100, the 7300 and the 7610, as well as many other new features. So now supporting nearly 100 radios, so say well worth checking out if you're a Apple Mac user. As always, we'll put a link on the ICQ podcast website. Well, now we head over to our features episode, the ever popular book review. Hope you find something you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode I wanted to tell you about some of the books I've been reading, and you may find these very interesting. There's a couple I think are very, very good and well worth a look, but let's see what you think. Don't instantly rush out and buy. My first book I got was a follow-on book from Glenn Popey, KW5GP. Now, about a year ago, 18 months maybe, I got his original book on Arduino projects for ham radio, and this book is more projects for ham radio. So, nice book, and I think if you're going to buy this one, you really need to read the first one first. The first book gives you a lot of simple projects to build with an Arduino, shows you the code and tells you what to do. This second book, More Arduino Projects for Ham Radio, is kind of much deeper. And although it's got some very, very good information about the Arduino and lots of bits and pieces about that, the projects in this book, although not as many as the previous book, are a lot more complex. Now, that doesn't mean to say it's outside of your skill set. And I must admit, I looked at some of these and thought, yeah, they're very interesting. I'm going to have a go at building some of these over the months ahead. But if you're somebody who's dabbling with an Arduino and you're into ham radio, then these books are the ideal ones to start off with and have a good look at. So what's in his second book and what makes the project so interesting? Well, there's an auto on-off mobile power unit, which could be useful to auto turn things off. Station power monitor. We're looking here, voice memory keyer. Wireless remote control coax switch. GPS-based internet time protocol server, if you needed one of those for some of the stuff you're doing with your digital modes. Rotator controller modifications and rotator controller rebuild for a Yaesu, so they're using an Arduino for that. Using a DDS chip to create a VFO between 1 meg and 30 megs, which is quite interesting. And for those of us who haven't got it, or those who haven't got one, an antenna analyzer. Glenn shows you how to build an antenna analyzer with a Arduino. So kind of interesting little projects. And for those who think, well, where's the radio? Yeah, he did produce a 40 meter QRP CW transceiver and a 40 meter QRP JT65 transceiver, all with Arduinos in them and controlling them. And they obviously software programmable. So kind of a very, very interesting book in my opinion. and one I've been thumbing through since Christmas and reading odd pages every now and again when I want to tax my brain a bit. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and as I say, some interesting projects that I'm going to have a go at over the next few months. Now, if you want to purchase one, it's an ARRL publication. It's available from the ARRL, the RSGB, Amazon, and various other book stores, I am sure. So, fairly easy to get hold of. And the full retail price is $39.95, so $39.95. I'm sure you'll get a discount if you're an ARRL or RSGB member on the price of this book, which is another reason for being a member of your local association. Second book, well, this one arrived in the post, and it arrived from my grandchildren in Ireland as part of my Christmas present. Now, this is my personal opinion, and I'm not going to upset the guy because I didn't find it that great. However, and I'll tell you the reasons why, it was a fiction book on amateur radio. Now, I think that the guy did a good job because obviously he's got a book out there and I haven't. But I think that comedy is often about timing. And to me, I read the book. I'm sure that some of these stories would have been horrendously funny had you been sat in front of the gentleman. But unfortunately, I wasn't. So reading it, I didn't find it as funny as I probably ought to have done. Anyway, the book is called The Owl is OK, The Trials and Tribulations of a Radio Ham and DXer. Now, this is a book by Lee Marsland, G0DBE, and he talks about his time in amateur radio, his trials and tribulations of putting up antennas, and all those sort of things, and his DX, some of his DXpeditions, and some of the people that have annoyed him. Although he doesn't mention names, some of the people have annoyed him in the hobby. Now, as I said, I think, Lee, this book would have probably been funnier if you'd have told it to me, but as I say, certainly a read. It'll take you a couple of hours to get through it, and as I say, it's not an expensive book, so if you fancy just having a pleasant read on holiday, which isn't too technical, this might be the one for you. The book costs $8.28. It's by Lee Marsland, G0DBE, and it's called The Owl is OK, Trials and Tribulations of a Radio Ham and DXer. And I'm going to put you out of your misery. The owl is a plastic owl he put on his antenna, and he got a lot of, let's say, complaints and concerns from people about it. So I'll let you read it on. Now, my third book I've been reading, and it's not a new book, but it's one I got recently, and I've been reading it, and quite honestly, I am a VHF and above man. And there are lots and lots of books for HF antennas, hundreds of them, but not so many for VHF, UHF and the microwave bands. And this book is called Antennas for VHF and Above. It's written by Ian Paul, G3YWX. And I met Ian, probably now getting on for 7 years or so ago, early on in the podcast when I interviewed him at his home down the other side of Dorking in the UK. Very, very nice guy, very, very clever guy, and a very, very good author. And this book is really, really good because it explains a lot of the antennas that we use, how they work. It gives you designs on how to make them. It's very, very practical because it shows you diagrams of how to construct them, and all in all, it's an ideal absolute go-to book for VHF and UHF antennas. So I kind of think that this book is going to live in my library a long, long time. Now, it costs £12.99. I'm sure if you're a member of the ARRL, you would probably get a discount on this. If you're a member of the RSGB, you get about £2 off this, so it's almost £2 off it. So it's worth being a member if you're going to buy a lot of books. And as I say, Ian, this one was a really, really good book. I really appreciated reading it. So, guys, not a long feature this time. Just a few books that I thought were quite interesting that I've been reading that I wanted to pass on to you and let you know about. I hope this has been of interest.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
As I close up episode of 261 of the ICQ Podcast, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have recording it for you. We have a bit of sad news at the start of this roundup. Mr. Jim Linton, VK3 PC, is now a silent key. Jim Linton, VK3 PC of Forest Hill, Victoria, Australia, died on February the 22nd of thyroid cancer. Now, for those of you who don't know who Jim was a big mover and shaker down in Region 3. He was a lifetime member of the Wireless Institute of Australia, and he also achieved the G.A. Taylor Medal in 2011, and that is the WIA's highest award for service to the WIA and amateur radio. Jim has been an absolute stalwart to amateur radio, certainly down in the Southern Hemisphere. There's been lots of things we've spotted that Jim has been the initiator of some of the news stories we've had from those side of the world. So, Jim, you're going to be extremely missed. And one of my regrets is that I never met Jim and never thanked him personally. But, Jim, if you can hear me, thank you very much for everything you've done to amateur radio. And our condolences go to the family. And, as I say, a great man will be sorely missed within amateur radio. Right, moving on. I'd like to thank the guys for joining me today. Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB, Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG, Mr. Bill Barnes N3JIX, and Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. If you'd like to find out more about what we do, the website is www.icqpodcast.com. We also have a Facebook group and a Twitter group, and Colin and I are both on LinkedIn and various other media sites. Don't forget, if you want to download all of the podcasts or you want to find out more, our RSS feed. Please use our RSS feed from our website. That way you will be able to get all the episodes. If you're using FeedBurner, there was a limit and we hit the limit of the file size and it crashed. That's hardly surprising considering Google withdrew support many years ago. So if you'd like to get involved, tell us what you've been up to, contact us via the website or email us. The email address is info@icqpodcast.com. While you're up on the website, don't forget to check out Colin's newsletter. He sends out a newsletter about once a week telling you when the podcast has been released and also telling us when he's got extra information that might be of interest to you. We also have a YouTube channel, quite strange for an audio podcast, but we release our audio to YouTube. And we get a fair number of people looking there. By no means is this the biggest area of our downloads, but it's just another place that allows us to tap into the increasing market of podcasts that people that want to listen to our podcast. We're also available on iTunes, via our website, TuneIn Radio, and iHeartRadio, to name but a few. So, all good there. I'd like to thank each and every one of our listeners for your downloads. They really do keep us happy, and we really, really do appreciate each and every one of your downloads. And thanks for taking the time of downloading and listening. We do appreciate it. I'd like to also thank our donors, our £1 donors, and our one-off donors. You do help us keep this podcast advert free, and we made a conscious decision very, very early on that we didn't want to take advertising, and I think it pays off in the long term because it gives you a more independent view from the presenters. Then we're not bought, we're not in anybody's pocket, we say it like it is or how we feel it is. So it's a good one. So don't forget, listener feedback is good to us. If you want to tell us anything, if you have a project you've been working on, if you would like to record some audio for us, we're more than willing to listen and run it, providing it's not libelous, of course. And equally, if you don't feel up for recording it yourself, we can do it as an interview, but we can sort something out. But remember, the podcast was set up to be for amateurs by amateurs. So there you go. So all that's left for me to do now is make that lovely Mrs. B a cup of tea, because she'll be in from work shortly. So I'll say 73s to you all, and don't forget, we'll do it again in a fortnight's time. 73.